Have you heard the story of how Mona Lisa ever actually got to be as famous as she is? Is it because she's the perfect example of what a woman should look like? Is it because Leonardo da Vinci is this sought after artist? Is it because the Louvre put it at front and center? It's actually for none of those reasons. It's because someone stole it and it turned into an international crime sensation. Just over 100 years ago, the Mona Lisa was stolen from the Louvre. While it was missing, the police suspected all kinds of people ranging from celebrities to bankers like JP Morgan and Picasso. The more celebrities that eventually got involved in this crazy crime mystery, the more notoriety and publicity that this story ended up getting. The Mona Lisa very quickly turned into a household name as a direct result of the amount of headlines across the world that this crime story was generating. It wasn't until the Mona Lisa was returned to the Louvre that people actually started paying attention to it, because Leonardo DiCaprio before was well known among artists, but wasn't really a household name until this story broke. So when the painting came back to the museum, everyone wanted to see the real painting behind all the newspaper clippings that they'd been seeing. See, a lot of entrepreneurs create something new, have a new product or a new business or brand, and they bring it to the market, and then there's just crickets. A lot of people think that because they build it, it's like Field of Dreams.
If you build it, he will come.
But unfortunately, we're not all Kevin Costner, and business isn't really like Field of Dreams. Startup investor Peter Thiel says, if you've invented something new, but you haven't invented an effective way to sell it, you have a bad business no matter how good the product is. So how can you take the lessons from that Mona Lisa story and then apply that to your brand or your offering? Well, there's a bunch of story-based frameworks out there where you can use them as blueprints to build out your marketing materials to use in all kinds of direct marketing, branding, and sales. And one of my favorite ones we're going to talk about in this video, it's called the Story Brand 7 framework. It's by Donald Miller. For short, it's SB7. It's a 7-step framework, and it starts with a character who has a desire and they have a problem. And after they run into a problem, they meet a guide, and that guide gives them a plan, calls them to action that results in success, avoiding failure. So number one, a character. So the character is always going to be the customer. So a lot of people think that the hero of the story is themselves, and we kind of use that to our advantage because the protagonist is the customer, not us. A lot of brands, if you go onto all of your competitors' websites, you will see that a lot of them position themselves as the hero or the character of the story, and they're missing out on a lot of business as a result of that because it's all about them instead of what they can do for their customer. So identify exactly what it is that the character in your story, so your customer, actually wants. What are their desires? Are they leading away from pain, or are they going towards desire? What are the two primary drivers? And then identify the problem. So number two, the character has a problem. So what is the obstacle that's in the way of them actually achieving their desire? Because that's where you're gonna come in. So most characters or customers have two problems. So there's an external problem, which is something that you can see and you can identify from the outside looking in. And then there's internal problems, which is how that makes them feel. So does it make them feel frustrated? Does it make them feel inadequate? Does it make them feel like they're just not that smart? What exactly is that? Because if you can put words to it and you can actually articulate it better than they can, then they're gonna assume that you can help them better than they can help themselves. Number three, meets a guide. So this is where we come in because we are the guide. So if you think of the Matrix, you have Neo and then you have Morpheus. Neo is obviously the main character. He's the hero of the story, but there's Morpheus that has all the wisdom and kind of shows him the ropes and kind of shows him the reality of the Matrix. And the red pill in this situation is that perspective shift. It's understanding that it's not all about us and it's actually all about the customer, and all of our marketing materials and everything we do has to reflect that. So there's two ways that we can establish that we are the guide, and that's through empathy and through authority. So apathy is the death of all customer acquisition. It's lack of interest, it's lack of enthusiasm. So empathy is obviously the opposite of that. We want to put ourselves in the customer's shoes, and we really want to identify exactly how they feel and what they're going through so that we can identify exactly how we can help them. And part two to that is authority. You can establish authority in a lot of ways. You can put logos up on your website of other brands that you've helped in the past. You can have testimonials on your website. You can have awards that you've earned. Number four, who gives them a plan. So usually there's a couple steps for most businesses that the customer has to take to or go through to actually receive the product or receive the service. You know, if you're like a weight loss coach, like maybe there's a questionnaire that has to be filled out. But the most important thing is to just identify exactly what those steps are and put them out as stepping stones for the character in the story, because because people don't like to be confused and they don't want to have to, you don't want them to have to use unnecessary brain energy and burn calories to engage with your brand or your products, because when that happens, that's when you start getting people to click off your website or click off the advertisement. As soon as they have to think, unfortunately, a lot of people, that's where you're going to lose them and they're going to click off. Number 5, calls them to action. So unfortunately, not a lot of people do things on their own. They kind of need someone to push them. So you want to push them with a call to action. There's 2 different kinds of calls to action that we're talking about. So there's a primary call to action, which is your buy now, get a quote today, and then you have a transitionary call to action. So the transitionary call to action is like download a free PDF, fill out your free assessment. It's something with a little less commitment. So Donald Miller says here, it's kind of the difference between like asking someone out on a date or asking someone to marry you. One's a very big commitment and you want to go, you at least want to offer the smaller commitment as an option, because if they're not ready to commit today, it doesn't mean that you don't want to start a relationship. Number 6 is that results in success. So you want to paint a picture of what success looks like, because if people can't imagine what success looks like or what it looks like to work with you, then they're not going to do business with you. Phil M. Jones says that if you cannot see yourself doing something, the chances of you doing it are slim to none. People make decisions based on the images they see in their mind. So if you can place pictures in people's minds, then you can influence their decisions. The best way to do that is through story. So this is a storytelling framework that you can use for telling stories as well. So this would be where you inject kind of some of these principles that we're talking about in that section as well. Number 7, avoiding failure. So Dr. Robert Cialdini talks about this in both of his books, Persuasion and Influence, that people are actually driven more by what's at stake than what they have to gain. So people will actually be more driven to not lose $100 than they would be driven to actually go out and make $200. If they stand to lose even half as much as they stand to gain, people don't want to take that bet. So you need to paint a really vivid picture of what it looks like to not do business with you and what's at stake for the customer or the character in the story if they don't take your solution or take your product or service as the solution to their obstacle to get to their desire. So that's the SB7 framework. You can use that for your brand, or you can also use that for individual offerings inside of your business. It turns out that it's not because the Mona Lisa is such a magnificent painting that it's so famous and has its notoriety. It's because someone stole it and there was an exciting international mystery launched around this entire story. So the story of the painting is actually what increased the value of the painting. It has nothing to do with the materials used, has nothing to do with the face structure of the model, has nothing to do with any of that. It has everything to do with the brand that was created around it as a result of this sensational robbery. I hope you found some value in this video. If you did, please be sure to let me know in the comments below and subscribe to the channel. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.